Let me get this recorded. Wow, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's pretty cool. Uh,
Uh, yeah, we're not even quite there yet. It's got another about 18 minutes, but that's all
yeah.
right.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wanted to apologize first off. I had a little bit of technical problems. I had to use a different computer. Um, but I figured we could just get the best out of our time. No.
Okay, let me turn on some lights here so make a better picture.
Sure. So, um, maybe we should. I'm Joe Pereira. Just to get that out of the way, I'm set this up here so it's all recording. I am I own a small company. That's neither here nor there, and this is the first episode of something called a podcast I have going on called Psy, and yeah. And I've been a big fan of your work for a long time. Pretty much, I think since I somehow one of your interviews popped up on my phone. It was a pretty strange experience, to be honest. It was like ever since then, I got a copy of My Big Toe. It's sort of a mammoth work, but I've been digging through it and getting a lot out of it, especially out of my own sort of, I guess you would say, experiences with the larger consciousness system and with entities in the sort of non-physical. What would you just, maybe I should ask you a question here since we're running short on time. There's two systems that we would interact with, basically, right? There's the, what would you say that systems that we interact with are in the physical realm, and then the sort of larger, uh, non-physical matter realm?
Yeah, the larger consciousness system, I call that. That's a non-physical realm. But we have time, Joe. We haven't even actually gotten up to 1 o'clock yet, so we're not running out of time.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe like just so if you anything you want to say about yourself, just to get started, or I could just add that on later on.
Okay. Well, let me ask you: are you going to record this as video, or video and audio, or just audio?
Well, right now I pretty much just have audio going on. Like I said, I had to use a different computer.
Okay. Then if the audio gets a little squirrely or something, what we should do is just click out of our video, because the video is what squeezes the bandwidth, the available bandwidth on Skype. So as long as it's working, we might as well talk to each other. We can
Sure.
see each other. But if the audio quality starts to go, then just let me know. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little picture of a camera. If you just click on that, then your video will go away.
Yeah, I could turn off the video and everything.
Yeah.
So let me maybe get started. Since we're gonna be recording this on audio, I hope you don't mind if I have a smoke.
No.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous. Like like I said, if you saw me, man, the scramble I had trying to get this running was mighty stressful. But you have been a hero of mine. So I'm a little nervous. It was when I began in the inspiration for the podcast side was, I had a period of time, I guess, interacting with what you would call the larger consciousness system, and there was psi phenomenon happening to me, and I noticed it was happening to other people as well on a scale that I was sort of surprised to see. And so I thought, I'd have a podcast, and so that other people wouldn't think they were going insane, which is, I think, a very real fear. That would you say that's a fear that could happen when you start to broaden your reality terminal, your reality tunnel?
Mm-hmm. That's right. A lot of times people are confused. don't understand what they're getting or what's happening to them, and sometimes they think they're going nuts.
Is there, just to kind of dig into your own life, when that started happening to you, and you started having experiences that were out of body in nature, how did you, given the lack of real protocol, scientific protocol, to determine whether you're having a psychotic or a reality expanding experience, how did you sort of quantify it for yourself?
Well, I didn't first experience it as an adult. I first experienced out of body as a child, so I was probably somewhere like 5 to 7 years old when I first started doing out of body. And for me, then it was just a whole lot of fun. So there wasn't any stress involved in it. It didn't come across to me as a stressful thing, or even something that was too particularly unusual. You know, kids have a lot of imagination. They're not should we say, committed to materialistic beliefs at a young age. So we're still pretty open-minded at that age, and
Right.
that's when my out of body first started then, and then I didn't get back to it after a long span until I was an adult. But then I was something I was pursuing. I wanted to go experience it, so it wasn't something that just happened to me. Then I was at Monroe Laboratories with Bob Monroe, and the whole point was to experience these larger consciousness, system, and to see, whether or not it was real, just to investigate it. So at that point, it still was not a bothersome thing. So I never really got through that period where somehow it seemed like it was strange and it worried me. I never experienced that. So I've always been at ease with the process of getting around in the larger consciousness system.
And maybe I haven't read the full book yet. I didn't see your experiences as a child. Well, maybe you could kind of dive into a little bit what your early experiences with out of body were like, just so maybe people can relate to them.
Yeah. That is in the book. It's in the first section of the book, like the first, I don't know what it is, about 15, 16 chapters or something. It's just all about my own experiences, starting as a child. I had some entities come to me when I was young and teach me how to go out of body.
Right.
Take me out of body and put me back and take me out, and then teach me about how to do it on my own eventually, and work with me to develop skills for using out of body. And the interesting thing is that though I was, let's just say, I don't remember the exact age, but like I say, somewhere between like 5 and 7, because I was, even though I was young, once I was in the out of body state, I was more like an adult. I didn't process like a 7-year-old. I was processing more like a 27-year-old. So it was kind of interesting, because then I come back from the out of body state back into my body again and make the transition back to a child.
Yeah,
so I did that for a fairly long time until I had learned the things they were trying to teach me, which basically was how to get around, how to function, how the out of body reality worked, what I could do there, things that I should do, things that I shouldn't do, that kind of thing. So, I did that for a while, and then I stopped doing that. They kind of closed that off because they didn't want me to grow up too strange. So I didn't do the out of body after that, but I always had non-physical friends. I always had entities in the non-physical that I could get information from or get guidance from or that sort of thing. That was always just there. I never even thought about it being very strange. It just seemed to be that's just the way it is. I suspect I either didn't think about it or assumed that everybody had those kinds of connections.
Right.
That seemed perfectly normal to me also. And then once I got I'd learned to meditate in graduate school, and once I learned how to
This was transcendental meditation, correct?
yeah, transcendental meditation. Yeah, at that time it was very inexpensive for students. It was only $25 to get initiated into the transcendental meditation. So I took advantage of that as a graduate student, and it's probably 5 years later or so, 4 or 5 years later, I ran into Bob Monroe, and then once I started purposefully trying to access the non-physical, then a lot of the things that I did as a child all came back to me. And I remembered them all very, very clearly, and it all kind of fit together. I guess I'd never really forgotten them. I just didn't have any context in which to, in which to deal with them. And then after I had a context, all of that came back and made sense to me. So that's kind of my history. Now, I'm a scientist, I'm a physicist, and the only reason I was able to successfully write the My Big Toe trilogy that explains the nature of consciousness and reality is that I was able to do a lot of experimentation while in a non-physical state. So you can go to these other reality frames and you can, do science like you do here, eliminate variables, always go to the same place at the same time in the same way and see if the same things happen or do different things happen. That would tell you whether, you were running into others that were exercising free will and didn't depend on yourself, and so on. How do things work? If I do this there, what happens? If I can do things here to affect things like remote viewing or healing, what happens? So you just have to do it hundreds and hundreds of times where you can collect statistics on what variables change what results, and it needs to be repeatable. So for 35 years or so, I was doing those kinds of experiments and trying to figure out how the larger reality worked and what you could do with it, what you couldn't do with it, what were the constraints, where did it come from, all of those sorts of things. And then in about 2003, I published the My Big Toe trilogy, 3 books that kind of give an explanation of consciousness primarily. And then shortly after that, I realized that the very same ideas, the very same logical process that brought me an understanding of consciousness also explained physics better. And if I hadn't been a physicist, I wouldn't have noticed that. But because I was, I saw that connection and realized that it was not just a theory of consciousness, but consciousness is fundamental to everything else. And I could do better physics. I could understand quantum mechanics and relativity and other modern science phenomena and paradigms, paradoxes as well. Could understand those things that physicists really couldn't understand by applying the same logic that I had to understanding consciousness. So that's kind of where I come from, and what I've done and what the books are about.
Yeah, see, I think I'm going to cut off the video. Just the sound's getting a little distorted.
Okay, then I'll drop my video out too, and we can just do the rest.
All right.
There we go.
All right, great.
Now your video is still on.
Okay.
I can still see your video. It's a little video camera on the bottom of the screen. There should be 4 little round dots, and the first one should be on the left. Should be a video camera. You just click on that, then a microphone, then a plus sign, then a red telephone. I don't know if you see those. Should be at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, your video has knocked off. The sound has gone better though, so I think I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it shouldn't be. Your sound's gone a lot better. I had to, like I said, I ended up using the web app, so it might be a little different.
But yeah, it could be. But someplace you ought to have a little icon of like a camcorder. If you can find that on your screen, and if you click that, that'll turn your picture off too, and it'll make the audio a little cleaner.
All right. Well, for now, it seems to be all right. Something I noticed with my own interactions with, non-physical entities is something similar. They seem to be trying to teach me about the sort of virtual nature we live in. One thing that changed initially was perception of people's eyes. They seem to be a little bit wider. I was told so that was I wouldn't forget what was going on. And maybe this is something you can relate. This started maybe about 9 months ago for me, and obviously it sort of took over what I was doing. There's a period of time where I thought I was losing my mind, and that was about a month or so. And then it was fun. And the first time I had an interaction where it made it so that I could actually use it in a successful way. I was given some computer passwords. I wouldn't say I'm a hacker, but I travel in those circles, and I was given passwords to a Twitter account. And so how would you how, how did you notice the difference between, or do you have names for, like, if you're interacting with someone else who's traveling in a non-physical realm that's a human, or just a completely non-physical entity? Do you have sort of ways of classifying them, or is it just sort of, it doesn't really matter at that point? It's all just consciousness.
Yeah, I'd say mostly it doesn't matter at that point. Some of the entities you run into are embodied here. Others are not. Others have been here but aren't here now, and others have never even heard of the place. So you run into all sorts. You can ask them about it and their familiarity, and usually you will get an honest answer.
Right.
But for the most part, and I used to do that in the earlier days of my experience in the non-physical. I would just ask, but it really doesn't make that much difference anymore. You just interact with whomever, however it seems most natural to interact, and what their history is really isn't all that important.
I mean, yeah, I would say that the differences have been great in what I've been interacting with. Everything from entities claiming to be, based out of Saturn, or a location that about, to entities that just claim to completely not be physical, or psychic energy. I've had that happen to me. Um, and right now I'm still at the phase where it sort of comes and goes. I was sort of hoping that I would have some sort of interaction while we had this interview, but um, in other ways, it is distracting. So maybe it's for the best. Um,
Well, you have to be a little careful of what entities tell you. If they tell you they're from Saturn or they're this or that, that's not necessarily the way it is. In other words, every entity that you talk with doesn't. I don't. It's maybe not the right way to express it, but it's not going to necessarily tell you the truth. You're going to get information from them, data, and the data you get, you have to interpret. Okay. So it's not like you're getting exactly what they're sending. They send something, and what you get is something that you interpret from the data you receive from them. So it has to do with your own knowledge, your own fear, your own expectations, your own caring, all of that makes you your own experience base. All of those things affect how you interpret the data. So you have to be skeptical all the time of what you get. So it's not so much that these entities are trying to lie to you and trick you, although that's possible. It's mostly because your interpretation kind of muddies the water, if you will. And it's always, it's difficult to be 100% sure of anything you get, whether it's partly your interpretation that makes it seem that way, or whether that's actually the way it is. So the best thing to do is be open-minded, but be completely skeptical of whatever anybody tells you. That's why it really doesn't matter when entities start giving you their history or where they're from or whatever else they've been doing. It's kind of, take that with a grain of salt. It's just the way it is. You interact with it. You can deal with it as is on the face of it, but don't take it too seriously.
right.
It may or may not be that way.
And I guess it doesn't, matter, because as you are interacting with them in that moment, they're not, So I guess you're trying to say that, don't, just because you're having a non-physical, conversation, I guess, as it were, like, don't treat them as other omniscient or necessarily.
Yes, or even that you're getting exactly what they're sending, or that they're honest. You just don't know. So the best thing to do is deal, straightforwardly with all the information, but be skeptical of all the information. It may or may not be the way you're getting it.
All right. That's definitely helpful. Like I said, I've had interactions that have helped me, maybe some in the same way where it helps you, debug and do things like you said happens in the
Mm-hmm.
and then in conversations that have almost been unpleasant. They've never had a visual aspect. I've never gone out of body in that way. Maybe you want to talk about the different sort of experiences that one could have briefly, just in terms of the nature of and the whether it has to do with whether you're operating out of a lower entropy, non-fear based. Will that sort of change the experience you have? Whether you're coming from a place of fear, will that change?
Absolutely. That'll make all the difference in the world. If you have uh, if you have fear, if you have very little experience, and it's like a brand new thing for you, you don't have much experience. That means you won't really know how to interpret things very well. The fear will make you interpret things more fearfully. You If you have expectations, like you've read books about it, and you have some kind of expectations of what it's like and what it should be like, that will create a difference in your experience. Or if you just, like most people do, if you take the way our reality works, the way this um, physical reality of ours works and the way we're used to, and we kind of overlay that on the non-physical. So we expect we see these non-physical entities as beings like us. We see them as being in places that are all separate in space and so on. And all of that's just our own belief system from this physical reality being overlaid on this larger consciousness system. So all of those things will get in the way. And it just takes a lot of experience. You need to do this over years, and you need to experiment with it and keep probing, what's real, what's reliable, and what isn't. And eventually it'll all sort itself out. But it's just a very difficult thing in the beginning when you don't have the experience that you do have fear, you do have ego, you do have expectations. You can't help that. That just comes with being human in this virtual reality that we live in. So you have all those things, and they get in the way and make the experience very difficult, and your experiences seem to change a lot. It's like it's hard to know exactly what's going on because there's so much variation, and it changes from time to time, and everything seems undefined and difficult to deal with, and mostly that's just the lack of experience and your own fear, ego, and expectations getting in the way.
Um, I mean, that seems to make a lot of sense. Like, my big toe and all the interviews on your website have helped me interpret a lot of what's going on in a fashion that sort of made, the traditional, let's say, spiritual goals, dissolution of your ego, improving your consciousness, help make sense with this, what was happening. I have history of working with the NSA, so, first thing I jumped to was, NSA style conspiracies, that it was some type of voice to skull attack or something, but that didn't seem to make sense with what you were saying. And then after a while, that just wasn't helping to, as I guess you would say, continue, grow in a consciousness in a low entropy sort of fashion. It was just not,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't seem to be what these entities. And then there was a brief period of time where I tried to, maybe, I don't know, this is something you can go into a little bit, where I sort of debated whether it was something I should just ignore these. I guess you can call them psychic experiences. I mean, I know you said you had never had that time in your life, but do you know if there's ever, people who just sort of seem to say, well, maybe the best course of action would just be just ignore what's going on here, and if that's
Yeah,
possible.
sometimes people try to do that, but often it doesn't work out that well because if they are open to these experiences, typically they happen whether they're trying to ignore them or not.
Right.
So it's Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, and then it puts you in a struggle with. So now it's you kind of struggling against them and so on, and then that makes the fear get greater, and the anxiety goes up, and that sort of thing. And then you start, getting a little paranoid about it, and
Oh yeah.
all what's going on, and who's doing that, and what's happening to me, and you start searching for
Answers that maybe you won't find.
the sources. If
Right.
somebody's trying to drive you nuts, and it just goes into craziness then, and so you don't want to struggle with it. If you can just put it aside, that's fine if you're not ready for that yet. But the best thing to do is just deal with it as it is and as it comes. Don't jump to any conclusions. Don't try to overthink it. Just let it be. It's just an experience. You're having experiences, just like you have experiences while you're awake. You have experiences when you're dreaming. You have experiences when you are daydreaming, daydreaming off in your imagination. Those are all experiences that you have. This is just another form, another type of experience. So just deal with it like that, and don't try to overthink it or put it into a context too much in the beginning, because you don't have enough experience to really put it into a context successfully. So if you try to force yourself to put things in a context and you don't have the experience to develop that context, then you just end up chasing your tail, spinning your wheels, and raising up your fear and anxiety levels. So just deal with it as the experience. The experiences themselves usually aren't that hard to deal with.
I mean, I would agree with
Just
that.
let them be.
I think that my struggle, I'm sure this is common too, finds a context for these beings, led them to sort of actually try to find a way to interact with them that maybe for me would seem most pleasant. So I've had them, I've had experiences where they've claimed there was some sort of, society that would be, you would want to interact, whether it was the Illuminati or, and these things, when it sort of went to that level, it sort of became comical, where, it didn't really matter. I could see that they were just sort of trying to find a word for me to grasp onto,
Mm-hmm.
at that
Right.
point.
Right. So you just don't take any of that too seriously. That's what I say. You have to always be skeptical of what you get, and just kind of let it, just think of it as another set of experiences, and you just interact with them. You don't need a particular context for it. You just, it's just something else you experience. And as long as that isn't a horrific experience, then it's not a problem.
Yeah, I guess, sometimes I've come to sort of look at it that way. Another aspect of it is that you are sort of you're sort of in my mind, how this developed, you're sort of like the whole grandfather a bit to me. So, some of the questions I'll be asking you wouldn't be questions that I, normally ask, even of the experiences themselves, but that's how it is right now. Maybe you could kind of go into what I've been trying to work through lately is how to derive benefit from it other than just having fun. You said, you know, work through problems in physics and things like that. And in the in the in the physical realm, maybe you can give an example or two of that. So when you
Okay,
go past
sure.
just trying to have fun.
What you experience is largely going to be driven by your intent. What you intend to get out of it, what you want, what's the what is in it for you as far as learning goes. That's that's going to be the thing that drives the experience more than anything. So if you have an intention that you would like to learn, you would like to understand, you'd like to get a bigger picture and see how all of it works. Yet you don't want to be, you don't want to be bothered by stuff that's just nonsense or just, chit chat or that kind of thing. That you really like would, to learn some things, and then have some questions, have some things that you'd like to learn, some things you'd like to understand, and then ask those questions and stay focused on them. So if you do all that, then your experiences then will start to make more sense and have some more value. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just like you're chit-chatting with whoever happens to be around. It's like walking out of your apartment in a big city and just striking up conversations with whoever happens to walk by on the street.
It's just
not all that
informative. In the larger consciousness system, basically.
Yeah. So you're in this system, and we would like to make some sense out of it and learn some things. If you approach it in that way, then it will start to make sense to you. If you just are going to chit-chat with whoever comes by, then it'll never amount to too much.
And you've been able to get, you've been able to get qualitative sort of data or interact with these beings in a way that's really helped you deal with problems like, I don't mean problems like a life problem, but let's say physics problems, stuff like that. You've been able to, is there an example of that you can give just to...
Oh, sure. There's a lot of examples. In my book, I talk about how, they help debug code, and you mentioned that too. But there's lots of things. If you start a project, I do, when I was working, I'm retired now, but I did analysis of large complex systems, looking at risks and other things about the system, how the system works and why it works that way. And often when you deal with very large, complex things, it's hard to know where to start. It's hard to know how do you get a handle on this big thing, because there's so many variables, so many things that are affecting it, that it's very difficult for people to even get started on it because they don't know how to approach it. And often I let all that come to me intuitively. I don't have to figure that out logically. I let it come to me intuitively, which means I'm getting this information from a source other than just my own logical thinking. And that seems to always work very well. I'll start on a problem, not knowing exactly why I started on it in the particular way that I did or going the direction that I'm doing, but I follow my intuition. And always it works out after I look back at it, 6 months later, that it was the perfect place to start, that it led me exactly in the direction I needed to go, and that the solution to the problem falls out very, very quickly and easily from the path that I'd taken. And I found that over and over again. So that's one of the ways that I use the connection to the larger consciousness system in just everyday problem solving and in everyday life. That was my stuff at work, but that also works for you in your stuff not at work. Your non-work life works the same way. So you need to be both a very right brain person and a very left brain person. The right brain person is the one who is very intuitive, understands holistically what's going on and how things connect and what's happening at a holistic level. And the left brain is more of a logical process type brain. And you should excel at both of those. So you let the right brain guide you when the left brain really doesn't have enough information to work with. And then you want the left brain to put logical steps together for you when it does have enough information to work with. So if you're both of those, then that's really the best of all possible worlds. Most of us in our culture tend to be left brain.
Right.
We tend to try to think about everything, figure everything out. And often we just drive ourselves into stress attacks trying to do that when we don't have enough information. You see, it's better just to learn to live gracefully with uncertainty, relax, and not feel like we have to come to logical conclusions about things that we don't have enough information to do that with.
And and of course, with the larger consciousness system, which, I guess you can never really totally get anything near a left brain handle on the whole thing. Maybe like a brief kind of summary, like when you say we live in one thing I've had trouble kind of when I try to briefly explain your work, and I say that, we live in a sort of virtual model, which, one way I've looked at it is, Alan Watts had his 3 models of reality, the sort of, the ceramic model of reality where everything is like the Judeo-Christian model of reality, where everything was just sort of put into place and it just was knocked in by like a watchmaker. The sort of organic Chinese model of, it's everything's just sort of growing organically, and the Maya and being the third model, everything's a bit of like a play. And now we have this third model, or this fourth model, which is a virtual model, which makes a lot of sense when you start to interact with non-physical entities. But the first thing I get when I try to explain that to people, well, so if it's a virtual model, can you like escape like the Matrix? And I try to put that it's not really like that. That's not the goal of it. But if you could maybe sort of briefly give a summary of what you mean by that, so
Sure. It's a virtual model because it's a computed model. You have to think when they say, "Can you escape?" You have to ask them, "What do they mean by you? Who are you? Are you the body, or are you the consciousness that's playing the body?" You see, in a virtual reality, your body, the physical world, is a virtual world, and it is not fundamental at all. It's just like your elf in World of Warcraft or your character in The Sims. It's just a virtual character. That's your body, just the virtual character. It's you or the consciousness, the player, who makes all the decisions and choices for that virtual character. So if you, the virtual character, want to escape, no, that's sort of like the elf climbing out of the World of Warcraft and going over to play in Sims. Or, the elf getting out of World of Warcraft and come sitting down next to you in the chair at the computer, and play a World of Warcraft game himself. That's not going to happen. You're in this reality, this physical reality, as a consciousness playing what seems to us to be a physical body, okay, which is just an avatar. So now if you think of yourself as the consciousness, as the player, rather than as the elf, the body, then yes, of course you can escape. You already have escaped. You're not in the virtual reality. You're a player of characters that are in the virtual reality. So you're already outside of this quote, physical, unquote, universe. You are consciousness, and as consciousness, you have the ability to, travel, interact, experience throughout the whole larger consciousness system. You're not restricted to this virtual reality. So the one answer is no, you can't escape if you think you are the avatar, the physical body, and yes, of course you can escape. You're always escaped if you think that you are the consciousness, the player of that avatar. So the idea of this being a virtual reality just worked out as the logical consequence of all of my experience. How can you make all this experience make sense? And everything pointed to this being a virtual reality, that this was just information. Our experience is information. We know that in as much as our experience is what we sense. We here in this avatar's virtual reality, so think of ourselves now as the avatar. We, the avatar, only sense the things that come through our five senses. That's it. We see it, we hear it, we smell it, we feel it, okay, we taste it. And if we don't do any of those things, then it doesn't exist for us. Those are the only things that exist. So that defines our reality. And what is that stuff? It's just information. It's data that we collect and then interpret as being this reality. So it's not that difficult to see that our reality is information. It takes another step to realize that we, the consciousness, are primarily information processors. We take that information and we interpret it to be this reality frame. Now, when we're doing that playing World of Warcraft, the information we get is 1 million pixels. Each one has a color, an intensity, and a location. And that's it. Each pixel has those 3 pieces of information about it. And we take all of those little colored dots and we turn it into an elf running around in the woods, fighting with trolls and demons and things. We interpret those bunch of little pixels into that reality frame. And that's the same thing we do when we are consciousness playing a physical body avatar in this reality. We take all that information and we turn it into a 3D virtual reality experience. So when I first wrote these books in 2003, there was hardly anybody in the scientific world other than myself and probably Edward Fredkin, another physicist, who thought virtual reality was really a good idea, who thought that virtual reality made good logical sense. But since that time, the results of physics experiments have been convincing physicists all over that virtual reality is the only way to explain the results of these experiments. So now virtual reality is a very common thing inside of physics departments. A lot of physicists think that this is a virtual reality because that's what the experiments say. There's no other way to explain them other than this is a virtual reality. See, we physicists have given up thinking of electrons as little chunks of mass with charge. That doesn't work. If you try to model it that way, you don't get the right answers. You can't predict what the experiment's going to do.
But if you think of them as little bits of information, that
But
allows.
if you see the electron as a point with the attributes, right, it's a point with the attributes of mass and charge. Well, the attributes are just information. So there's information of charge, information of mass, and they exist at a point. So that's the way anyone would describe an electron in a computer simulation. It'd be at a point, and it would have attributes of mass and charge. And if you think of it that way, then you can predict the results of physics experiments. So we realized that thinking of things in terms of information makes good sense in science, and thinking of things in terms of physical chunks of matter really don't make sense in science. And even all the particles in particle physics, they don't really think of those particles as hard, massy particles. They call them virtual particles, you see. So it's just a way to use the word particle, which makes them feel better because they have been raised on materialism, but they're not really, your grandfather's particles. They're not little chunks of mass that just like baseballs, but smaller. They're not like that at all. So science is coming around to realizing that indeed the experiments show that we are living in a reality based on information. That means a computed reality. That means a simulation or a virtual reality.
And do you think
that's a growing thing in science? I suspect in another 10 years, the last 10 years, it went from almost nothing to that's a very strong hypothesis now. In another 10, it'll probably go to the point that everybody agrees with that.
And so you think this will really be like a paradigm shift towards how we think of things, or it's just
Yeah.
wow, that's
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a big paradigm shift, and it's occurring right now. All big name institutions, in physics, the MITs, the Caltechs, the people that are working and running, CERN, the Planck Institute, all the heavy hitters in science all have personnel, all have people who think that this is a virtual reality. It's not like just a few people out on the fringe who believe that or think that that's the way it is. It's pretty main core, particularly in the better schools, that this is a very strong hypothesis now that we're living in a virtual reality.
Well, I mean, like I said, like from a subjective point of view, I'm not a physicist. It makes a lot of sense because it allows subjectively an elimination of variables, or you're not trying to solve, well, how could this physically be happening? If you take the virtual model of it, it allowed me to understand sort of my like you said, me being an avatar and thus able to interact with other entities. One thing you said is the first thing I sort of jumped to is, oh, maybe it's like a UFO thing, and then I remember the talk where you said, well, even if your mind is opening up to that level, you're expanding your model of reality. And so, um, was there like a point when, you came back to it later on, and you tried to scientifically look at it where you had you know, were you ever trying to sort of put labels on it? You early on came back to meditating, or did you just dive straight into it as being, well, okay, these are completely non-physical entities, um, and I'm just going to work with it that way? Or was there a time when you were really just trying to, put labels on maybe classes of entities or things like that? How was that experience for you? If I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
well, in the beginning, I was open to any of it being possible. I was just looking at what were the possibilities, and any of those things were possibilities. So I did experiment and did some thinking about what if the entities were beings from some other physical place in our universe. The ETs, if you will, and could that be the case that even if it wasn't their physical selves that